Hello, everyone. I'm very happy and honored to introduce everyone to our talk this afternoon. It's on service learning for language learning. And Dr. Cecilia Takmaza Hatch will give us a talk on this topic. I'm very much, looking forward to this because I really want to learn about this. So, Cecilia, can you give us introduction about yourself?
Yes, I will be happy to. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cecilia Tocaimasa Hatch, and I'm an associate professor at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. I teach Spanish language courses. I teach also graduate classes for the graduate programs that we have, such as the graduate certificate in Spanish. Some of the classes that I teach include assessment, curriculum, vocabulary learning, and then other different classes. Like right now, this semester, I'm teaching an introduction to translation and interpretation. And a feature of my teaching at UNO is service learning. So I offer many classes every year that include service learning projects. And in case you were wondering about my accent, I'm from Buenos Aires, from Argentina. And so that's why I talk like I do. All right. Oh, and then my co-presenter is or was going to be Dr. Julie Dierberger, also a colleague from UNO, but she cannot make it today. We've had a very busy day at the UNO campus with a power outage. And so she's busy dealing with that problem still. All right, so we'll start first with some definitions, okay? So in the chat, please share a 1 or 2 sentence definition of service learning, if you don't mind. We're going to be using the chat today.
Yes.
So anything that comes to mind about how you would define service learning. Maybe nothing comes to mind, and that's okay too. Yeah, learning through service. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So yes, so in looking at some definitions, I like to show people this diagram, and then we'll look at another one later on. So where you can see a broad category that's called experiential learning. Experiential learning is an umbrella term, a big category, and under that umbrella term, we can fit several forms of experiential learning, including student teaching, for example, if you are in a teacher education program, or you can have an internship, right? If your students are doing some work in the community that's going to help them prepare for a job. Volunteering. So there's also volunteering where you can do service without any particular curricular component to it. You can also do a teaching practicum again, looking at teachers. And then in there, we can also see service learning, right? And so this shows the variety of ways in which students can engage in experiential learning. And so if you take students, for example, on a field trip, even, let's say that you decide to do a visit to a theater or to a university, right? So all of these experiences are part of experiential learning, okay? And so here we have what Cole describes as the experiential learning cycle, right? So he talks about concrete experience, followed by reflection and observation. Then there's this abstract conceptualization and active experimentation. And as you can see, this is very cyclical, right? So this is what we want students to be able to accomplish through experiential learning, where they can experiment, they can have concrete experiences, they can reflect and observe. So take a pause and then reflect on the experience and then draw abstract conceptualizations from the experience, right? Those are this is where learning happens, really, where this is where the students start developing new ideas, right? Then I'm going to show you here some definitions now as we try to zoom in into service learning in particular. And so here I have two definitions, and I would like you to read these definitions and in the chat include keywords or phrases that that you feel that are at the heart of what service learning is. So we are focusing on these two definitions. And so if you can tell me some keywords that you see in these two definitions. If you look at the first definition, is there anything that you feel in that definition that is at the heart of what service learning is? So any keywords or phrases from these definitions? No? Okay. We'll continue then, and I'm going to show you some items that usually participants, when I have done this workshop, that people usually identify. And so for the first definition, usually people talk about active participation, right? They also highlight actual community needs. So the fact that students are doing something to actually meet a need in the community, not something that they think that the community needs, but actually that the community actually needs. Then there's this integration into the students' academic curriculum. And then, like I mentioned before, reflection. Reflection is always part of anything that has to do with experiential learning. If we look at the other definition on the right, so some keywords there that people usually highlight include combined. So you have this teaching method which combines community service with academic instruction. So again, academic pursuits are combined with community needs. Then you also have critical, reflective thinking and civic responsibility. And then also local needs. So these are some of the key words that we can identify that are fundamental in understanding how service learning works. And so here you can see, again, this spectrum, right? Where you can see different relationships that are created through different forms of experiential learning, where you have on one end the provider of the service and the recipient of the service on the other end, right? And the beneficiary or focus. So when we're looking at service learning, we can see that there's a balanced approach to the experience where both the provider of the service and the recipient of the service benefit from the experience, right? And when we're looking at other forms of experiential learning, we don't have that balance. That balance is lost. And for example, when we talk about being a volunteer, there's very much a focus on providing something for the recipient of the service, less so on a focus on the person providing the service. On the other end of this spectrum, we look at an internship. So if you think about somebody doing an internship, what they are trying to do is very much learn the profession and develop experience, right? So now the focus then is on the person doing the internship, right? And the place where they're interning, it becomes a place of learning, and it becomes a place where they are providing that instruction and needed experience for the intern. Okay. So yeah, so this is what differentiates service learning from other forms of experiential learning. Then to add to those definitions and keywords, we also talk about what we call P16 service learning. So this is defined as a collaborative, mutually beneficial experience between pre-kindergarten through high school students, college students, and the community partner. So here you have these three parts to this triangle that are part of P16 service learning. So you have your P16 students, you have a community partner, and you also have college students. Okay, so that gives another layer to a form of service learning. Okay, so this is the P16 model where we have those different pieces. And then we have the traditional model that usually people think of, where you have a community partner and the university. So this is something that we do a lot at UNO and in other institutions of higher education, right? So we do this traditional model, but it is very possible and encouraged to also have this P16 model where we're working with you all, with your classes. And so this is the definition that UNO uses. So we talk about service learning as a method of teaching that combines classroom instruction with meaningful community-identified service. Okay. And so this is the information that Julie was going to present today, because she has all the data for the university in terms of our participation in service learning. And so I'm going to try to share that with you based on the notes that she shared with me. So this is data for the years 23 and 24. So we see 251 service learning courses. So these are courses at the university that we offer that come with that identifier that they are service learning courses. We have worked with 334 partners, and then I don't know what she means by professional development. Oh, perhaps that Service Learning Academy has provided a lot of professional development that relates to how we do service learning. Okay. So other notes that she included. So we have worked with 14 high schools, 6 middle schools, and 7 elementary schools. She includes some here, such as Benson High School, Omaha Central High School, Field Club Elementary. That's where my students have worked this semester. Mercy High School, Miller North High School. We have also worked in the Nebraska Correctional Youth Facility. We have also worked with Schuyler Senior High School, Spring Lake Magnet, Washington Elementary. So those are some of the schools that she included in there. Now, what is the impact? Why do we do this? Well, for us as a university, we understand service learning to be a high impact practice. So when we do service learning, we are able to increase student retention, because students find a community, they find a lot more meaning in what they're doing. And so we are able to keep them engaged with us, with the UNO community. They also develop civic skills. They, of course, develop skills that they need later on in life, right? After they graduate to join the workforce. Student attendance, again, connected to a student retention. We are able to expose individuals to higher education when we do projects with P16 projects, right? When we have our high schoolers come, when we have our middle schoolers come to campus, we are exposing the kids to higher education and planting the seed in there so they see themselves one day as university students. And then we are also moving the needle on real community impact. So trying to meet some of the needs that the community has. Okay, so now that we have determined what service learning is, we have talked about what we understand by P16 service learning. We will turn then to the rest of the presentation for today. And so we have 3 questions that we are going to explore. The first one is, what can service learning do for my language class? What are examples of service learning projects for a language class? And how do I create my own service learning class? So if you don't mind, just so we get our creative juices flowing, I wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind writing 3 challenges to teach in your classes today. And then hopefully we can see how service learning might be able to help, perhaps, with some of the challenges that you are experiencing in your classes. So again, we'll go to the chat if you would like to share. So if you can think of 3 challenges. Low motivation, classroom management. Yeah, it's hard to keep those students motivated, right? We're telling them it's important that they learn languages, but it's hard to keep them engaged. They have a hard time retaining what they learn. Yeah. Relationships between teachers and students. Active engagement, keeping up with assignments. Absolutely. Yeah, okay. So let's explore a little bit then. I think it would be good to come back to these challenges later on and see if, perhaps service learning can do something for you in targeting some of these challenges. Okay, so first question is, what can service learning do for my language class? So there is quite a bit of research and on service learning and language learning that has been published in the last decades. And but the bulk of the research focuses on adults. But I think that we can draw a lot from this and apply it to your own teaching. So number 1, so something that we see in terms of linguistic gains for L2 learners. So we see genuine language negotiation. Language learning requires interaction, talking. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. I can't learn language without engaging in language. And so service learning provides some of those contexts where students can negotiate language. They can improve their proficiency because they're using the language more. They can become more aware of culture and pragmatics. They can also develop their vocabulary. They can renew their motivation for language learning, and they can assess their language skills in real-life context. So what happens a lot is that when we take students out in the community and they have to do something in their target language and they have to interact with speakers of the language, they realize, 1, this is useful. 2, they realize that they have a long ways to learn the language, right? It's like a reality check. They are also sometimes motivated. They feel like, oh, I have a lot to learn here. I'm not doing as great as I thought. So that motivates them to continue. So those are some things that happen when we take students out of the classroom. Then if we are working with heritage learners, there are also many linguistic gains that these students can experience. So for example, students can also be motivated to continue learning the heritage language, and that supports language maintenance. It again reminds students and reaffirms for them the value of their bilingualism, right? It increases their awareness of sociolinguistic variation and register, right? So these heritage learners have learned the language at home, family, church, right? But then if they're exposed to other forms of the language, they become aware of what's out there, right? Sociolinguistic variation, different registers and dialects. They also, for example, when we talk about Spanish heritage speakers, it's really interesting that they are able to work on their identity as part of the community. And I think that that would apply to any language and any community, right? Students are making those connections with the community. Now, there are also clearly some benefits for all. So students create these connections between classroom theory and real world practice. So then they see that what you're teaching them in the classroom all of a sudden has a lot more value because it's helping them actually achieve something outside in the real world. Number two, the second bullet point, they develop a sense of civic duty and democratic citizenship. So they are more inclined to look for such opportunities later on in life, right? Because they took the first step already with you. And so they are more open and more comfortable engaging with the community later on as well. They develop leadership skills, right? They're doing projects, they're collaborating, and they become more engaged and resourceful. They have a task, right? Now, I'm not doing a task just for my teacher to read and grade. All of a sudden, I have a community that needs me to do a job, right? So the stakes are a lot higher, and that can help students feel a little bit more engaged. Now, based on the gains that research on service learning has reported, what are learning goals that you would like to foster in your classroom through service learning? Can you think of anything that where service learning can be helpful for you in terms of your learning goals for your class? If you want to share something in the chat. So how can service learning help based on what we just learned from the literature? How can service learning help with some of the learning goals that you have for your students? Yeah, so you can help with some of that motivation, right? Usually what happens with students that they realize, oh, this is serious stuff, right? So I'm not doing work just for my teacher, for my classmates, just to pass the class, just to get a grade. You know, they're actually have to report to somebody outside of that very comfortable context. Yeah, so they can use language in real context, so you can help with some of the proficiency issues that you guys have mentioned before. Longer sentences, right? So they are producing more language, and language that's authentic, right? That's outside of the textbook. Okay. Now, something that we want to emphasize always is what can service learning do for my community partners? So we talked a little bit about what it can do for your students, for my students. What can service learning do for the community? As we said before, we are aiming for that balance, right? And so it's interesting in the literature, there's a lot about benefits for students, but less so benefits for the community partner. And we cannot forget that we need to also work in meeting needs for the community partner. So to address that question, I want to talk very briefly about a study that I conducted. where I looked in particular at the question of what is this project, my service learning project, doing for my community, right? And so this is the name of the title of my article that I published a few years ago. So at that time, I was working with my advanced conversation class, my Spanish conversation class. We partner with Completely Kids here in Omaha, which is a nonprofit here. They serve to close to 2,000 children, and their goal is to ensure that families have access to the knowledge and skills necessary to break the cycle of poverty. So some of the demographics here, so 72% of the children are Hispanic and 82% are younger than 12 years of age. And so why did we partner with them? So the purpose of the partnership of the Service Learning Project was to foster language maintenance and learning among young bilingual children, right? So we wanted to serve these children. My students were there to serve those children. And at the same time, my students were learning from the experience. And so the project consisted of an after-school club. So the children participating in the program, they were between 4 and 8 years old. They had been born in the US to Spanish-speaking parents. And so my UNO students were enrolled, like I said, in an advanced conversation class. And my class had a mix of Spanish to learners, heritage speakers, and Spanish native speakers. So it was very, very diverse. And so the students offered then, what did my students do? The students offered bi-weekly 1-hour lessons for 3 months. And during the lessons, they read books, they taught vocabulary, they played games, and they conversed all the time in Spanish. At the end of the semester, we also hosted a party at UNO for the children and their families. And so that was fun to do as well. And then before starting the project, my students, they had training on lesson plan development. They learned about interaction strategies with children. They also learned about Spanish as a heritage language in the US and the issue of language maintenance and loss. And so for me as the instructor of the UNO instructor working with my advanced conversation class, my goal was to have my students immersed in Spanish language and to use it for authentic purposes. And then, like I said, as a researcher, I really wanted to find out if this project was really doing something for the children in Completely Kids in helping them maintain and learn Spanish. So because I wanted to complete research, I had data gathering happening on the sidelines. And so my students recorded their lessons with the children. And then I attended all the lessons myself and took notes. The UNO students wrote reflections on the experience. And I interviewed the children's parents and the coordinator of the organization to have information on their perspectives and what they had seen and learned from seeing their children participate in these lessons weekly with my students. And then, like I said before, I really wanted to find out if the experience was useful to the community. So that was the question. I wanted to find out if it had been useful and what did the children gain from the experience. And so I carried out a qualitative analysis of data that I collected, including the transcripts of the lessons, the transcripts of the conversations with the parents and the coordinators, my students' reflections. And I focused on 2 themes, on 2 constructs. So the first one is called a linguistic affordance. So linguistic affordance is knowledge. It's knowledge building exchanges that represent opportunities for language learning. So any opportunity that I could see for language learning in those conversations or in those interactions, those are called linguistic affordances. And then I also focused on social affordances. Social affordances have to do with the development of information that results from the exchange, even if unspoken, which promotes learning. So this is a little bit more abstract, right? And it has to do not so much with language learning, but perhaps with feeling supported, right? So even though I'm not saying those words, I am conveying that meaning, right? And so that's something that then creates, that affords, that the space in which we were working together afforded for those students, so social affordances. All right, so now focusing on the findings of my study, I found a lot of linguistic affordances, right, in my analysis of the data. So the students and the children had talked about animals, family, school, colors, numbers, constellations. So imagine all the vocabulary that they learned there. They had learned word meaning, they had learned how to pronounce certain words, right? They had talked about gender agreement. They had talked about word order sometimes, although this was less frequent. They had done lots of word searches, and they had also done grammatical corrections, right? Where somebody was saying something wrong, somebody else was recasting or giving some feedback. And something that I like to point out is that it wasn't just my students in the teacher role, but also children repaired each other's language too. So my students were learning the language as well. So it became a very collaborative context. And so in terms of social affordances, and as I mentioned before, social affordances are the development of information that results from the exchange that can lead to learning. So I found that service learning encouraged children to realize the importance of speaking Spanish. Number two, service learning showed them that there are non-Hispanic people who wish to learn their language. And then also service learning helped children gain confidence in their current skills. And so I like that because none of these things were uttered, but then in the reflections and in the different things that happened, we could observe that these were kind of the messages that students and children all alike were exchanging and receiving from that partnership. So I'm going to show you now a little bit of the data that I have from that study. So this is a transcript from a conversation between a child and my student here. And that's me, and then the child again. And so this conversation took place during a lesson while the children were engaged in a coloring activity, and a 7-year-old child spoke of the difficulty she experienced learning speaking Spanish, right? So if you notice here where the arrow is pointing, she says, my daddy knows Spanish, but he doesn't know English, but I don't know much. And so then the student said, it's okay, right? And then this excerpt continues. And so here you have where the student asked, why are you feeling like that? And so the child said, again, this is a 7-year-old, says, because I don't know how to say things well. Sometimes a more difficult, when you do it in Spanish, it's very hard, right? And again, she's producing this language in Spanish. So then the child continues, it is hard because I don't know how to speak very much. And then everybody went like, no, like, don't say that. But you speak very well, said one of my students. And then the child said, I only know a little, but like be like things like that, right? And so you can see here in this exchange, it's a little long, I don't want to bore you with it, but you can see that the child opened up, right, about the difficulty that they experienced with the language. So my dad speaks the language, speaks Spanish. I have a hard time with it. But then the child was surrounded by people who are very supportive of that and said, you speak it well. And, at the end, the excerpt concludes with, "You're learning." And the child is like, right? So the child feels then that they are actually on the right track, right? Even though they, so hopefully that motivates them to continue to use the language. And so therefore, so like I said before, the purpose of this investigation had been to look at linguistic affordances and social affordances. And this is what I found in this study, that yes, service learning had been really important for the partners that we worked with. In terms of linguistic affordances, we had looked at a lot of language learning, right? And then in terms of social affordances, there was a lot of encouragement, fostering maintenance of the language, building confidence in these young bilinguals. And so because of this, we can see that service learning can really do something wonderful for everybody involved. So yes, like I was saying, then these findings suggest that programs rooted in service learning can contribute to the preservation of the heritage language in a partnership where both university students and children interact and benefit from the exchange. Okay. All right. So based on the gains, this is the question for everybody, so that we're going to use the chat again. Based on the gains that research on service learning has reported, what are 3 learning goals that you would like to foster through service learning in your language classroom? So 3, let's focus on 3. And how could your class provide meaningful service to the community? Now try to connect those 3 goals that you have and think about your own community. Is there something where these 2 can meet? So your learning goals and a need in your community. Can you think of anything? Any learning goals that you might have? And how do you see those perhaps matching with a need in your community? Anything there? It's a little hard sometimes, especially via Zoom. Yeah, okay. Proficiency, cultural awareness, communication skills, right? And these are big goals, right? Proficiency is huge, cultural awareness also. So we can look at these items on a spectrum, right? And so students can start working on it in that continuum, right? And move the needle in the right direction. Yes. And sometimes it takes time to find those community partners. And then, like we will discuss later on, sometimes once you find the right partner, you continue working with them. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every single year. You can keep working with them and keep building the relationship and the project. All right, we'll come back to this later on too. Now, I'm going to show you now some examples, right? Sometimes that helps a lot to kind of visualize or imagine the direction that you can take based on some examples once you see what other people have done. I'm going to start now with some projects that we have done at UNO. And then I'm going to show you some examples that have been published in the literature on service learning. No, that jumped a lot. What happened there? Oh. Okay. So here's one. So this is a project that I did during COVID. So I called it Service Learning Light. And I think that there's always room for service learning light, even if we're not going through a pandemic, because sometimes that's all we can manage, right? So the partners here, so it was an upper level Spanish class. We worked with third graders in a dual language program in OPS. The project was an after school program conducted remotely via Zoom, and the UNO students led discussions and games. Now, again, during COVID, so we were connecting via Zoom and doing what we could that way. So the learning goals, we were trying to target reading comprehension. We wanted the students to read non-academic texts. And most of all, we wanted people to read for pleasure. That was the goal this time. We wanted people to explore other forms of reading that were fun. Okay, so that was one example that we did. Here's another example. This project was a P16 service learning project called Watch Me Grow. The partners were 3rd to 5th grade classes and UNO classes from ILUNO, so the intensive language program that we have, an intensive English language program. And so what they did for this project is that they developed a cookbook where they included student favorite cultural recipes. So the students were grouped together, right? And then in doing that, in working together on these recipes and on this project for the cookbook, they got to know each other. They learned about each other's cultures. And so the learning goals in this case clearly were intercultural competence and sensitivity and writing. Next project. So this one also is a project from our COVID years. And so it was called Language, Culture, and Power. So these were UNO teacher education students. And they partnered with the Boys and Girls Club of South Omaha, middle school age children. And for this project, the participants met via Zoom to discuss and unpack current events affecting the lives of the youth. For example, isolation or civil unrest, racial injustices. And the purpose of this project was for the UNO students to learn about remote instruction. The youth learned constructs to put into words some of their feelings and experiences, right? So again, you have that partnership and the benefits for everybody involved. All right, so some examples now from the literature. So this is an article that came out a few years ago now. So we have student teachers that worked in a dual language book project with English language learners attending kindergarten and 1st grade. And the program's objective then was to strengthen children's lexicon as they participated in literacy promoting activities, while the student teachers applied concepts that they were learning in their class and in their classroom at the university, but then they could apply them in the real classroom. And then the findings, these showed that the student teachers gained unique insights into teaching theories through hands-on experiences. And then, of course, children were able to improve their vocabulary and their literacy. This project is called How Healthy is Your Neighborhood? So we have 3rd and 4th graders. We have undergraduate students, and then an organization in the community, right? So we have the 3 pieces in there. And then in the description of the project, we find that they were developing and teaching curriculum on healthy neighborhoods. And then the students had to present proposals to city councilors that they have worked on together. And so this project is not only about language, it's also about content. And so they were targeting such things as social studies, in addition to the target language. And then the last one here, in this article, the authors talk about a 12-week service learning program that was implemented by pre-service teachers that consisted of reading sessions for children ages 8 to 12 attending after-school programs. And the program aimed to promote children's work consciousness in order to foster comprehension and communication skills. And so they had different levels of instruction, such as informal word instruction, formal instruction that where words were explicitly taught, etc. And the authors found that the project created literacy experiences that supported children's vocabulary learning. All right, so we have looked here so far in this section, different projects, okay? So we looked at different projects, different partners, right? And different learning goals that were accomplished in these different projects. Now, tell me which one you liked, which one resonated with you of these projects. Can you tell me one in the chat that, you know, when you heard about it, you were like, ah, that could be interesting, that could be applicable for my class? So somebody mentioned working with the museum, with local museums. Yes, light ones. I love that. The idea of doing a service learning light to get started. Yes, we don't need to do something huge. The last one, that was the reading project. Yes, okay, wonderful. So here a quick note about partners, right? So we talked before when we looked at the definitions of service learning about the different pieces. And so there is a lot of flexibility when it comes to partnerships. So you can have your class work with a community partner and university students. So then you have the 3 partners. You can have your class work with another class in your school, right? You can have your class work with university students, or you can have your class work with community partners, right? And so you can see that it's very possible. Like, for example, I would recommend if you want to do a service learning light, that you start here, your class working with another class in your school. Maybe the 5th graders go read books to the kindergarten class, something like that. Okay, so reflection time. From the examples we have seen so far, are there any that might serve as a model for you and that align with the learning goals that you have for your class? Is there one in particular that you feel might align with one of your learning goals that you stated before? And the reason why I want you to connect your own learning goals to these examples is that creating a service learning project is difficult, and you don't have to do that. You can take from the experience of others and replicate, if that makes sense. So that can make your project be easier to manage and to handle if you already have a pattern that you can follow. Is there one in particular that you think that you might use that connects well with one of your learning goals that you had established before, or perhaps even one of the challenges that you described before? Like, I remember some of the challenges that you had mentioned included classroom management. You had talked about low motivation, engagement, relationships between teachers and students. Is there anything in there, for example, that might help you improve relationships between teachers and students? Is there something in service learning that could perhaps support that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have the website and reading assignments. Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. When the students become teachers themselves, they understand things better, for sure. One thought that comes to mind right now is I'm thinking of my colleague. So my colleague partnered with Keep Omaha Beautiful. And so they went, she went with her students. Now, these are students in Spanish 1, okay? So very, very basic knowledge of Spanish. This is their first semester. So what they did is that they went to pick up trash. And so how is this useful to their language learning? So what the professor did is that she goes around telling them words in Spanish, right? That for all the things that are picking up, for the bags, for the shovels, for brooms, anything that they might be using, she's telling them the vocabulary, right? As they go together and do their job. So you can see how even beginning learners can be immersed in these experiences, right? And something that one reason why she likes to do service learning is that it actually helps to connect with her students. Because then the teacher is working side by side with the students in that particular case. So sometimes it can really do something magic for those relationships when they see you in the community as well with them. So I was thinking about that in relation to teacher-student relationships. All right, excellent. Now let's talk about how do I create my own service learning for my class. So this is the last part now of the presentation. And so we are going to watch a quick video here, okay? Where they are going to talk about how we go about creating a project. However, before we get into the project itself, there's a bit of a framework that we have to keep in mind that has to do with the communication that we establish with our partner, identification of learning objectives, etc., etc. And so this is going to cover some of that information. See if we can get this video going.
Hi, my name is Peter Cito, and I'm a professor of social work in the Grace Rapids School of Social Work at UNO.
My name is Shelley Brown. I teach 5th and 6th grade science at St. James Teaching here in Omaha, and I have been lucky enough to take part in multiple service learning projects with the Service Learning Academy.
And I'd like to talk about 3 things to consider when you're preparing a service learning project.
Well, the first thing I thought about is communication, and you are in luck because the Service Learning Academy is awesome at communication. When you first meet with the nonprofit and the professor you're going to work with, there's lots of really big ideas, big projects, lots of big plans. What the Service Learning Academy helps is take those big plans and make them into something concrete. They also help as you continue going along in your project, as things change. They help you make those connections and help you figure out how to keep that project. So your graduate assistant will be fabulous to help with that.
First thing is to consider what learning objective or concept you have that exists in the real world. So for example, I taught a course on mental health, and I wanted students to experience inpatient psychiatric settings. So I set up a service learning project that they would go into an inpatient psychiatric setting. The second thing to consider is to have
The second thing that I think you need, which you already have, is your strength as a teacher in your students. So your UNO professor is going to be an amazing expert on the material. However, you are the expert in your students, and you're the expert in your students on how to get them excited about the project. You're the expert in how to teach them the concepts and how to take the information from the UNO professor and his or her students and make that relevant and interesting and understandable to your students. You are the one who can figure out how to take your standards and have them fit what your project is. So you want to make sure that you are aware of all the strengths that you have as a teacher in relating to your students and being an expert in your students.
The second thing to consider is to have really good working relationships with the people you're involved with at the agency. And so there you need to plan, spend some time talking, sharing, inviting them to class, having them speak while your students are at the site. So that way you make it more real and make it as authentic as possible. The third
The last thing that I can think of that you need for a successful service learning project is to be adaptable. Okay, so just as this guy has made our family much more adaptable here at home, you are going to need to be adaptable as you go through your project. So all kinds of things are going to happen when you do your project. Okay, I've had everything happen from getting on the bus and having it full of bees and having a kid get stung to getting to our project and finding out that we didn't have the objects available that the students were going to study that we planned on studying. They're not having enough time when you actually begin your project to get it all done. And a good reminder there for me is always that it's not necessarily just the product, it's the journey and it's the experience you have as kids keep going. So just remember to enjoy the entire ride and you'll have a great project. And finally, the last thing that I would say is really important to keep in mind to have a successful project is to be adaptable. As you know, as a teacher.
Okay. All right, so lots of good advice from the video, okay? And so important things to remember then is to have an honest communication, open communication with your partner. Sometimes you will meet with somebody and you'll be like, sorry, I don't think this will work for me or my class. Sometimes the partner will ask for things that you really cannot do, right? It doesn't, sometimes the timelines don't match. Sometimes the potential community partner might not be as responsive. There's a lot of that. If you're working with a nonprofit, they're so stretched out. They might not be responding to your emails, and that makes it hard. They're understaffed, and sometimes they are not as quick as you'd like them to be. Also, when you meet with a potential partner, you will have lots of ideas, lots and lots of ideas. And it's very, very unusual for someone to have a project in mind that is carried out just like it had originally been planned, right? So it requires flexibility. Something very important is to plan ahead of time. Usually we recommend starting to make plans 8 to 12 months ahead of time. While it is possible to come up with a project 3 months before the school year begins, there's a lot more you can accomplish if you start early. People are busy, and so it takes time to plan. Also, like I mentioned before, you do not need to start with a new partnership or project every time. You can establish long-lasting relationships and projects that can be repeated or completed in parts. be flexible and adaptable, and help your students to understand that they also need to be flexible and adapt to the circumstances. This one in particular is a very important skills that I feel that students lack sometimes. They need to remember that they need to adapt. They're not there to be served. They are actually there to serve others. And so they need to be part of the solution, not the problem, right? And so this is why it's important. It kind of shift the focus from students who can be a little bit, very focused on themselves, to actually focus on others and deal with some ambiguity that comes from engaging in these projects. We have a website that you can visit. I'm going to put this in the chat. And you'll see in there that there are organizations that have a wish list or a project that they have in mind and things that they would like to do. And so that would be a great place to start as well, to start looking at community organizations, anything that catches your eye. Could they fit in any project that you are trying to do? Also, there are a couple of templates that I'm going to share with you. Maybe. That you can also explore. This one doesn't seem to be working. Okay. But if you go to the website for Service Learning Academy, you'll find this template that we use for our projects that can help you in the brainstorming process and organizing your ideas. Let's see. I don't know if you want to spend time on this now, but I share with you then information there about different educational standards and skills within your subject area that can be applied to a project. So that's something that you can explore also, trying to connect all the dots. And also then highlighting again that there's lots of outcomes that have to do with service learning, not just things that relate to language, such as interpersonal communication, problem solving, career exploration. We've had students that do projects and later on they're like, oh, now I know that I want to do this for a job, right? Critical thinking, civic development. Okay, this is kind of the section that Julie was going to work on, but I'm going to go over this quickly. And so again, you're looking at trying to focus on projects that have a meaningful service, right? Also, you're looking at diversity. How does my project integrate diversity, right? People of mix of students and participants in terms of age, race, ethnicity, religion, etc. And then reflection. Reflection is key in any service learning project. So students need to critically examine what they do and what they learn from the experience. How can I incorporate reflection before, during, and after the project? Okay. So here are some things that you can remember when you are planning the reflection piece of your service learning project. Length, the setting, and the learning style. It can be quick, it can be a defined time frame. It can also happen over the course of the project. Students can also reflect alone. They can do so with peers, right? You can have a class discussion with other students. They can also reflect with the community partner. And there's also many ways in which this can be done. They can do a written reflection, they can have a discussion, they can explore other means as well. Some students might like to do music, they might like to create other artistic representations that explore their thoughts on their project. And then how does your project integrate progress monitoring and assessment? Again, right? Consider then how the different tools that you have available to you, so you can collect data on student progress, so you can ensure continuous improvement. So again, observations, written tests, written reports, reflections, oral presentations. All right. We're going to take now a moment then to brainstorm. Maybe we don't need 10 minutes. Maybe we'll just need a few minutes. Okay. And you can share with everybody then any thoughts. And I think we can use either the chat or we can just use the microphone. Any thoughts, any ideas that you have right now that you would like to share? Sometimes sharing service learning is very much about, connecting with others, right? So if you have any thoughts or ideas that you would like to share. Yes, I'm looking for the template. Let's see. Since that link didn't work, but I'll find it here. And the other question was, do you do your service learning as a whole course or a few classes? So everybody, the whole class. This semester, for example, I'm teaching a translation and interpretation class. And this is an upper level class, so students are advanced in their abilities in Spanish. And so students are doing two projects. So first, they went to interpret during parent-teacher conferences at Field Club Elementary. I have worked with Field Club Elementary doing this project for several years now, where every time I teach this class, I do this. So then in the class, we prepare the students so they can go interpret and be successful interpreters. And then we go interpret. So they did that in October. And then the class also targets written translation. And so the students are working on a self-guided tour for Glacier Creek Preserve here in Omaha. And so right now it only has one in English. And so we are hoping that this will open up opportunities for Spanish speakers to go and enjoy the space there. I am looking now. That link didn't work for me for that template.
Just unmute if we have any questions.
Yeah.
What do you think?
While I look for this template, if you have any questions or comments.
I have a question. Say, when you do your observation and while students are working with the students at the community partner place, do students work like one-on-one and then you just observe and take a few notes, and then the students also, what the students will afterwards you require them, what do you require them afterwards? Are they providing their in addition to reflection, are you providing them, are they providing their own, like a few notes as well as a part of the course?
Yeah. So you're talking about the research project?
Yes, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so students, so this was an advanced conversation class, and so what I did in preparation for that is that I worked actually with the librarian and with the faculty member in teacher ed who specializes in literacy. And so I prepared the books that students were going to read and focus on. And then they also had a workshop where they learned different skills. I mean, nobody can become a teacher in one workshop, right? But we wanted to give them some tools. So the students did all that preparation. They did the lesson plans they had to create. They had to submit them to me. I looked at the lesson plans. I gave them feedback. And then they went with one partner every week, because we had weeks, we had the lessons every week for 3 months. And so they went 2 students. So they took turns going to teach these lessons, and then working with different groups of kids. Yes, and I attended the lessons so I could see what was happening. And then because I was interested in carrying out research, I was also taking notes. And the students then did reflections like mid-project and then at the end of the project, where they could kind of reflect on what they had learned, what they had gained from the experience, what they had observed. I don't know if that answers your question.
You did. Thank you very much. This is very helpful. Thank you. Great presentation.
Any other thoughts, questions? So I'm looking at our website here. So I'm going to share this with you. And it has a lot of information about projects that we have done. Community partners. Are you guys here in Nebraska? Are you in Omaha? Where are you at?
I think from different places.
Yeah, I'm from Northern Virginia.
Okay. So, and that's okay. So you'll find, so maybe the specific projects that I'm sharing there on the website, maybe those partners you won't find there, but, it's very possible to do this wherever you're at, right? So for example, I do a study abroad program. I take students to Spain every other year. And because I love service learning, we do service learning in Spain as well. In that case, service learning, yeah, so you're from all over Orlando also. So it is very possible to do service learning and get organized wherever you go. It's just having to make those connections. Like I said, I take students to Spain and we do that there as well. So we partner with different nonprofits, Red Cross. We'll work in summer camps for children since we go in the summer, right? So there's always something that you can do. It's just a matter of making those connections. And I think that you make those connections by being very alert when you go around your life, really. One of my first service learning projects that I did, I was at the zoo with my son, and I'm thinking, all these signs, they're all in English. There's nothing in other languages, And then I'm looking around and I'm thinking, we have such a diverse people here. How come we don't have representation of other languages at the zoo. So then I go to the office, you know, and I tell them, hi, I'm such and such, and have you ever thought about doing something like this? And my class could help by doing that. And so that was kind of the first project that I did. I go to my parent-teacher conferences at my kids' school, and I'm talking to the teachers, and I'm thinking, oh, you know, this is something that I could support. This is something that I could do, right? So it's wherever you go, you can find those opportunities. Any other questions? Thoughts?
Actually, I have experience working with UNO Service Learning Academy. It was great experience. And when I started that was years ago. When I started, students are not ready to learn. And also, why do we learn Chinese? Sometimes it's like they don't have all the other classes are enrolled. I mean, they're full, so they have no choice.
Yeah,
Or based on their schedule, they have no choice. So
right.
my experience is like I have a group of unmotivated students.
Yes,
When I started working with those students, I started working with Service Learning Academy. I get all the help setting up the project. When I started, I know nothing about service learning, but uh, when we get started, we would just learn along the way. That is, I want to encourage teachers, if you do not have experience, you will learn what you need along the way. It's not that scary. And
yeah,
my students really enjoy the field trips because they actually have the opportunity to experience Chinese culture. One of my project was leading my students into Chinese community so that my
yeah,
students serve as ushers for Chinese New Year gala. So
right.
they talk to different Chinese people because they are like novice high level or intermediate low level of
Yes,
proficiency. So they can do the greetings and show the directions and help the elders to find their seats. At the
yes,
same at the same time, they get exposed to the celebration and Chinese culture and also Chinese food. They're super excited. And
exactly.
yeah, a lot of time is like the counselors, the teachers, parents, everybody was serving them. It never occurs to them that they can use their knowledge to help others. So they
Yes,
feel so proud of themselves. Yeah,
yes,
actually, my class enrollment doubled after I mean, the first year of service learning. That was really, really helpful.
yeah,
And yeah, what I did to make, it more fun for students is that, like after the service learning, I contacted the principal and asked him to make announcement, acknowledgement from the Chinese community and also,
mm,
appreciation from me as a teacher because
yes,
they have done this wonderful service. And
exactly.
this made them super proud of themselves.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
yes,
my experience. It's really, really interesting and helpful.
absolutely, absolutely. That is so important. Just this fall, my students who went to interpreting field club, as I mentioned before, I've been doing this project for many years now, and so my partner there, she sent me an email saying, "This has been the best class that you have brought. They have worked so hard." And then, of course, I shared that with my students, like you're saying, Crystal, and they get really excited, that that they are doing something great and that people are appreciating their service. So yeah, I shared there our Instagram. It's that time of the year when people are posting some of the service learning projects. You might see some ideas in there. There's also the one that I mentioned about my colleague who took them, beginning students just to pick up trash. Then there's another class that was teaching, again, an elementary class teaching English. So partnering with the school district, right? And you think, well, they're teaching English, they're not practicing the language. Yeah, but they're teaching English to the community that speaks the target language. And guess what happens after they finish the lesson? They talk, they learn about each other's cultures. So, you know, it's enriching for everybody. So. All
Yeah,
right.
and also I think if you have any other questions, even after this session, and when you want to start your service learning program project, if you have questions, you can still contact me and Cecilia. I'm assuming you're okay, Cecilia,
Yes,
right?
of course, absolutely. I love service learning, so anything I can do to help you.
Yeah, Cecilia is expert, knows everything, and I have my own experience, so we
I
can
don't.
help.
Yeah. So I'll put my email in there. You can email me if you have any questions. I will also look for that template that the link didn't work, and I'll share that with Crystal so she can share that with everybody that registered today. Thank you.
Yeah, after Cecilia share with me, and you can, email me, and I can respond.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my email address. Actually, you can see it everywhere. Okay.
Yeah, and if you go online, you'll find lots of other templates. The idea of a template is that it gives you some guidance, on where you should start, right? How you determine your curricular, goals, right? Your learning goals that you want to connect. How do they connect with the community? Identifying learning needs in the community, instruments for reflection, etc. So it kind of guides you, but there are lots of instruments out there also for that online. But all right.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. This is really helpful.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, I learned a
Enjoyed it.
lot. I especially like the translation things I
Yeah.
think actually this can be used in a lot of places. Some places they do not have museums there, but they can help with the local like restaurants or other places with translation or, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
interpretation.
There are
Mhm.
lots of things that we can do. With the different elections, for example, another colleague, their students went canvassing. So again, there are lots and lots of things that you can do to help your community and to get your students excited.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Just be
All right.
creative, be
Yes.
open-minded. Mhm.
Yes. Just be
You
creative.
get a lot of thank you from the chat, Cecilia.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for the participation, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.